Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at classicstoday.com, here to talk about our obsession with trivia and why we should all just take a chill pill sometimes. Recently, I've been doing some videos about Mahler's Seventh Symphony, and a couple people chimed in about Leonard Bernstein's first recording with the sage observation that on the very last note of the finale, after an hour and 20 minutes of fun and frolic, Bernstein makes an unwritten crescendo, which is then cut off with the last chord. So instead of, da 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 ba da 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 da, bam, that's what Mahler wrote. And what Bernstein does is da 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 da, like that. Big damn deal. I said, that was the first recording of it I ever heard. I thought that was the way it was supposed to go. And like many people, many of you perhaps, when I heard other versions that didn't do that, I immediately went running to the score and looked everything up and, wanted to see what was really supposed to happen. Well, I found out what was really supposed to happen. And you know what? I don't care. And you shouldn't care. And I'm trying to share with you the wisdom of 50 years of music criticism and listening and other stuff. Well, I've only been actually doing like real criticism for 40 some odd years. But here's the point. When a performance is great, I mean, really just unimaginably great, as that one is, and there's one moment, one thing that you may not like or that raises an eyebrow, and then I had people write saying, a commentator called it disgusting, and I would like it except for that one moment. Oh, it makes me not able to listen to it. I think that's insane. I really do, and I'm being very honest about these things. I just want to tell you, at the end of the day, if everything else is fabulous, what are you making yourself crazy over? I mean, it's a tiny, tiny, infinitesimal point of detail, and it's a perfectly legitimate one. Yes, Bernstein does that, and he doesn't do it, I don't think, in his remake, actually, for Deutsche Grammophon. But the point is that it's a perfectly legitimate thing to do. I mean, you listen to any performance of anything, and I mean anything, and you find conductors making unwritten crescendos, retards, tons and tons of things. And because that one thing is obvious, and it happens to be on the last note, a bunch of people have commented about it with derision. And I think that is like, that comes into the category of a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Because how could you let that ruin the whole experience of the work for you? Where are your priorities? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It's like saying that you detest an entire performance that's utterly fabulous of Puccini's La Fanciulla del West because you don't like the singer who plays the Indian girl, Wokal. Wokal? Wokal goes, ugh. That's her entire part in The Girl of the Golden West. You don't like the ugh? Well, throw out the whole performance. There's a lot of that. There's too much of it in the world of classical music. And I confess, I'm a nitpicker. I'm a critic. I'm a nitpicker. It's my job to pick nits. I mean, people make fun of me because of my tam-tam obsession. My tam-tam obsession is a lot less than it used to be. I'll tell you that. And as I've said before, I take it as an easily audible, symptomatic example of many other things that are also worth pointing out. But that's something that's obvious that everybody can hear. That's why I usually use that. And it's kind of a joke between me and all of you fellow people who read my stuff that I'm the tam-tam guy. So I play with it. But my point is that it all depends on context, right? I mean, there's that. There are the people who couldn't bear Dochnani's Cleveland Bruckner recordings, which are fabulous, because he uses soft stick timpani instead of that carry-on hard as rock Werner Therechen, he was the timpanist there, with that, that hard Berlin timpani sound. It's like gravel, rolling around. I mean, it's thrilling. It can be marvelous. Don't get me wrong. But, you think that every entrance of the timpani in Bruckner has to be this sort of like explosion, this nuclear detonation of timpani sound. Well, no, it doesn't. There are many schools of playing, and they create different kinds of sonority. There's a school that allows the sounds of the timpani to blend and create a warm base upon which the brass chorales build and ascend to the heavens. I mean, there's all kinds of ways of looking at it. And one of the joys of listening to this music for me, and I think for a lot of people, is hearing these different approaches. What matters is not so much what the approach is. It doesn't matter whether it's period instruments or modern instruments. What matters is how well they're played, how well the interpretation comes across, how committed the whole thing is, how expressive and moving. I haven't met anybody complaining about Bernstein's crescendo or the Bruckner timpani or a million other little things like that, or missing tam-tams for that matter, who have been able to quantify the degree to which the thing that they detest changes the expressive meaning of the work and does something deleterious to one's ability to absorb that. I mean, it just doesn't happen. A lot of it is just the people trying to prove how smart they are. I heard that. I can point that out. There's that angle. That's the snob angle, if you want to call it. But there's that, and some of it is people trying to demonstrate what refined taste they have, how they're determined to let people know that no slight whatever is going to be unnoticed and not castigated for the abomination it is aesthetically. I mean, it gets to be a bit much. I'm a little sensitive to it now because I've been doing this for so long and I see so much of it. I see it in aggregate. You may have your one thing that makes you nuts. And, and there are, we all have pieces where we listen for specific moments and we want those moments to be a certain way, or we've heard a particular performance where it goes a certain way, we think it's thrilling, and no one else does it quite as well. I'll give you an example of one. At the climax of the first movement, in the coda of the first movement of Dvorak's Seventh Symphony, there's that big climax where the whole orchestra is building up and it goes dum bum bum, and then the horns go ba-da-dum bum 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 ba-da-dum bum 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 bum, with the timpani come in and all that. Well, there's a moment there where there is a low roll on the timpani, and nobody ever did it as well as Václav Neumann. For some reason, I don't even know if it's what Dvorak wrote, but it's what he does. So it's da-da-dum, bum, 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 bum. The horns go do, 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 and the timpani underneath just go pow. Like that. Oh, it's so exciting. And I always listen for that moment in every other performance, and nobody does it like that. And so, do I say that there are no other great performances of Dvorak's Seventh Symphony, or that I can't enjoy Dvorak's Seventh Symphony? Of course not. Other versions have other moments which are equally distinctive that Neumann doesn't do as well as they do. That's the way it works. When you're dealing with large works, particularly works in large forms, and that have all kinds of details. The fascinating thing is that no one performance encompasses all of them. It's not going to happen. And so you gradually listen to a lot of them. And what happens with me, I don't know about anybody else, is that I assemble my own composite version of all the bits that I like from all the different versions. And that's my view of the work. It's in my head, the whole thing. I can play it in my head the way I want to hear it, if it comes to that. I really can. And I enjoy the act of listening because that has a tactile presence that just hearing it in your head doesn't. And enjoy those for as many of the elements in that performance that go the way I think it should go. But I don't get upset because they do something that's a little bit different. I really don't. I mean, as time goes on, and this is going to be true of all of you, and I'm particularly speaking of people who are, sort of just getting into classical music or have specific performances that you imprint on and that you think are the way it has to go. As time goes on and you absorb, different versions and different views of the work, you will find that you can relax a little bit and that these differences become things to savor rather than things to spit at and get angry about. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to get pissed at an otherwise excellent performance. And that's my point. When it's 99% correct, if you're going to get hysterical over the 1%, then there's no help for you. I mean, there really isn't. It's just a total and complete waste of mental energy and time and effort and aggravation. I mean, life is too short. It just is. So what I'm saying to those of you who are in that category, I mean, you have a right to like whatever you want and to play the performances you like, to do whatever you think. You really do. But, when it comes to our discussions, I'm not going to let people make those cases as something as a lesson for others here, particularly. I curate these comments pretty heavily. I mean, I delete lots of stuff, I think, because I try to create a conversation that's going to be useful for people who don't know the work as well or who are looking for information and advice that's helpful to them. And advice that I do not regard as helpful is stay away from this performance because bar 65 doesn't sound the way I think it should, or the intonation in the brass. Oh, that's another one. Oh, the intonation people. Don't they make you crazy? Isn't it just absurd? I understand there are some people whose pitch sense is so accurate that poor intonation literally causes them pain. I mean, I had a friend like that. I mean, but they're to be pitied. They're not supposed to hold themselves up as examples for the rest of us. There's no such thing as perfect intonation. The whole concept of vibrato, which I love so much, is designed to deal with the fact that there's no such thing as perfect intonation, and that music actually sounds better when intonation is imperfect. If intonation were perfect, it would sound like a sine wave. It would sound like computer-generated white noise. And it would be as cold and lacking in feeling as the past few days have been here in Connecticut. Sub-zero. So we're not talking about the search for perfection. We're talking about the search for emotional truth, expressive truth, an idiomatic response to the work. And of course, everyone's going to have, their little tiny issues here and there. That's a truism. I know it's a truism. But what matters is not that people aren't going to make mistakes. What matters is keeping a sense of proportion when you're listening and being able to understand the excellence of a performance taken as a whole, and even though there may be slight imperfections along the way. Now, everyone has their borders, their barriers to enjoyment. I mean, Fort Wengler people, for example, who are more than happy to listen to playing that's just horrifying, that I won't tolerate, just because it's their guy, and he's just the conception is so wonderful. There are all kinds of examples we could argue about one way or the other, and no two people share the same standards of technical achievement that are going to bother them. But here in these cases that I'm talking about, they're usually not technical issues. I mean, a little bit of off intonation is not a technical flaw. It's a school of playing that tolerates a certain range. Same thing with Bernstein's crescendo. I mean, you have to let interpreters interpret. And you can't make tiny details of interpretation the linchpin of your entire world of listening to classical music. But I've already gone on with this topic for too long, I know. But really, it's just been striking me home recently, striking me at home, it's striking me homely. And so I wanted to mention it here and just ask all of you folks who are getting started and whatnot to keep an open mind. Don't worry so much, and enjoy what's there to be enjoyed, and you know, learn how to discriminate. That's the word, between things that matter and things that don't. If it's a don't, forget about it. Just enjoy the record. Enjoy the piece. Don't worry. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.